And we welcome you, women and feminists from all over the world, and however you identify yourself across the gender spectrum, we welcome you. We are community and we are together. I'm really honored to have such incredible presenters today, and I'm going to be introducing them right before they speak. And we're very grateful today to start our gathering with a song from Diara Tucano. Tucano, she's a Indigenous person from the Brazilian Amazon, from the Tucano people. She's an incredible artist. She's a coordinator of Radio Yande, and she's been a WECAN delegate at the UN climate talks. And we have many different projects going on with her and are so honored to have her be part of our WECAN network. She's also a beloved friend, and she'll be speaking later on in the program. But we wanted to start today with a song, because song is such a strong way for us to bring our hearts and minds together. So I really thank you, Diara, for starting us out in a good way. And I hand the floor over to you. Thank you, Diara.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Sisters from all over the world and every continent, from the seas and the mountains and the forests and the deserts. I am from the Tucano Indigenous Nation. We live in Brazil, in the border with Colombia and Venezuela. And we say that before time was born, the great-grandmother of the universe created herself into space, and it was her that thought about life and creating the world. And so we live in her womb, in her sacred waters of her womb, and every water that we cross, we treat as the milk of the grandmother of the universe. So we are connected by water the same way we are connected by the air and by the earth. And I would like to sing a song for the waters and salute every sacred water of your territory, of your body, of our body together. So bless the waters of the wood, bless all the mothers and all the grandmothers, all the daughters and granddaughters. Thank you. Anyu.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Diara, for that beautiful song and that blessing. Thank you for all the waters and all the connection of the women through the waters and the land. Today, we are honoring and lifting up the struggles and solutions of women worldwide who are continuing to call for a different path forward in 2021 and beyond as we work to reweave and forge a path forward in the midst of multiple crises, with global communities confronting the COVID-19 pandemic, climate chaos, patriarchy, colonization, racism, economic and inequity, and so many more struggles. And I want to take a breath and acknowledge the loss and grief of so many of us and how we have been experiencing this time. And to say that WECAN is here for you and that we see you. We know from communications with many in our network how hard this time has really been. But also in the midst of this difficulty, there has been also some really unexpected positive aspects as well. And we need to really build on those positive openings. We are committed and steadfast, as you know, in our collective fight for Indigenous rights, Black liberation, gender equity, feminist economics, care for nature, having true democracies, climate justice, and the protection of our beautiful planet that we hold so dear. I have been asked, recently actually quite a bit about the origins of WECAN. And that's a much longer story, but there's something that I do want to share today as a grounding for our conversation. I want to reflect a moment on the image of a flowering tree as we are beginning to experience the spring season in the Northern Hemisphere. And on this flowering tree are flowers with 4 petals each. And these 4 petals represent the 4 foundations of WECAN that we have been envisioning since the inception and also as our path to navigate through the crises we face. We know that the plant world is really powerful and can miraculously crack through the thick and hardened cement that covers too much of Mother Earth's body in the name of development and, in quotes, progress. But we too, as a collective of women, can crack those cemented systems of oppression that have been dominating our society for far too long. And these 4 petals of the flower from the flowering tree, as I say, have been our foundation since we started. And the first petal is the rights of women, the rights of women. And here our work is to lift up women and femmes, especially centering at this time, Black and Brown and Indigenous women voices in work. This work also involves the feminist agenda for Green New Deal, where we are working on national and global feminist climate policies with a really powerful coalition of leaders. And in this petal, we are calling out unpaid labor and lifting up the care economy and practicing self-care as a political action. The second petal is the rights of Indigenous peoples. 80% of the biodiversity on Earth is in the lands and hands of Indigenous peoples. And there's a reason for this. We have so much to learn from traditional ecological knowledge about how to live in harmony with Mother Earth, with nature. And for now, I just want to give one example, and you're going to be hearing many other examples as the women speak. We have so much to learn about Indigenous women's knowledge of economic systems, as an example, that are not based on capitalism, such as buen vivir or sumak kausai, coming from communities in the global South. These are profound concepts having to do with deep cosmological as well as cultural, economical, and political worldviews about a way of living in harmony with communities, ourselves, and nature. And Angela Sidney, who's a Yukon elder from the North, said, well, I have no money to leave my grandchildren. My stories are my wealth. Stories of how to live in a good way with the earth and each other. So this is a really different framing about what is wealth, the wealth of our knowledge, not having more material wealth. This work also involves the land back movement and food sovereignty and real reparations for living on stolen land. So we're really lifting up Indigenous rights. The third petal is the rights of nature, which is a framework and legal system based on the recognition of the Earth's fundamental right to exist, thrive, evolve, and regenerate. The majority of the world's legal frameworks treat nature as property, meaning that our life-giving rivers, our forests, our mountains, our deserts are seen as objects to be sold and consumed. But legal systems built on the premise of rights of nature challenge the idea that ecosystems are property to be exploited endlessly by humans, and instead recognizes the earth as a living, rights-bearing entity. This foundation, this petal also involves lifting up agroecology, protection of forests and reforestations, work that we're doing in various regions of the world. And lastly, the fourth petal is the rights of future generation. And this work involves lifting up women that are from our youth climate leaders. This is seventh generation thinking and stopping the madness of short-term profits and the mindset of just taking and taking. Instead, we need to live in reciprocity. We need to have policies and ways of living to care for future generations, and not only that of humans, but our plant and animal relatives as well. For WECAN, this also involves our work with financial institutions, meeting with top management at banks, asset management firms, insurance companies, and demanding that funds move away from fossil fuel extraction and infrastructure and away from deforestation. Instead, that investments and financing go to renewable and regenerative energy, to community-led solutions, and policies that really respect future generations. And we're really thankful to our partner, Divest, Invest, Protect, in this effort. So as we hear from our speakers today, we can keep this image in mind of a flower with these four petals on a flowering tree. There's no place, I have to say, that I would rather be today than with all of you as we collectively build power as women for a healthy and just world. And we were just saying as we were jumping on the call, you know, today is International Women's Day, but every day for us is Women's Day, because what would the world be without us? And, you know, after thousands of years of patriarchy, this is our time, because obviously the systems we're in aren't working. So I really want to have a shout out to all of you who are listening in. There are so many leaders on the call today, so many of you doing community work in your own areas and regions and territories. And I want to thank all of you for the work that you're doing, and know that collectively, this is our time as women for leadership, and the world really needs all of us together. And with that, I'm going to hand the floor over to Carmen Capriles. She is the Director of Acción Climática in Bolivia. She is the WECAN coordinator for Latin America. And together, she and I are co-coordinating a very important campaign on the Escazo Agreement, which is what she's going to be talking about today. And it was just ratified in Latin America at the end of last year. And we're really excited on the foreign motion on this particular new policy. Carmen, please take us away.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. Thank you, Osprey, for those words. Thank you, Dayara, for that song. And thank you, everybody, for being here. And congratulations on this very special International Women's Day. Let me Well, as Osprey mentioned, we're going to be speaking about the Escazo Agreement, and I'm going to be telling you a little bit why is this agreement important, and especially to focus that this agreement has to focus on women environmental defenders. So for the last years, these are some of the news that should have shocked us. It's why 2017 was the deadliest year for environmental activists, 66 environmental defenders killed in 2018, Colombia, 68 human rights defenders killed, Guatemala, 7 human rights defenders killed in 4 weeks. So those are some of the news that we have been seeing. And this is an analysis from 2017, where the killings have occurred. And we can see the world map, basically is in the global south, of course, but most of the killings occur in Latin America. We usually tend to think of conflict, human crisis, or wherever, like in the Middle East or in some other region of the country. Latin America is not the first place that comes to mind when we're talking about environmental conflicts or human crisis. But data show us that it's one of the places where the most killing occur. And basically, it's extractive industries. We have a summary here from 2017, 23 deaths for poaching, 36 deaths for mining, 19 deaths for logging, and 3 deaths for water and dams. And in this scenario, the most affected are indigenous people because 2 out of 3 environmental defenders are indigenous. So we have all this data on information, and also it's because indigenous territories are still in places that hold many of the natural resources. And in the global north, to keep the style of living that they have, they need resources to have the latest iPhone, to have the latest car, to have to show more wealth, to travel more, and so on. Resources are needed. And now the need of resources have pushed the industries, destructive industries, to be held in indigenous territories. Well, that's not new. It's been going on since 1492. And the story is even growing harder because we are in the era of human rights. So we have these reports, like for example, from Article 39 from Global Witness. This one's called A Deadly Shade of Green. For all the motives and what is going on and why all these defenders have been killed. And this report from Global Witness at what cost has basically 10 key findings. You can download the reports, they're both in the web. I don't have much time, so I don't want to get into discussing more these issues, but until here, we thought 2017 was the deadliest year. Nevertheless, what happened in the last years, especially having a pandemic? Well, in 2019, we have seen 300 human rights activists killed, and in 2020, also over 331 human rights defenders were killed. And we can see here in the graphic, although 2017 was the deadliest, in 2018 went down a little bit. In 2019, it went back up. And in 2020, a year of pandemic, a year where everybody was in lockdown, the killings of environmental activists continue. And what are the reasons? Extractive industries. So we're going to talk a little bit about little light of hope at the end of the dark tunnel that we're facing in Latin America, which is the Escazo Agreement. The Escazo Agreement starts in 1992 as the principle 10 of the Rio Convention. The Rio Summit in 1992 ended up with 27 principles. The 10th principle was the access right principle, which states access to information, access to participation, and access to justice. Why? Because governments alone cannot solve environmental crisis and cannot guarantee sustainable development long term if it's not with the participation of civil society. That's why it has these three principles embedded, and these three rights which are crucial, especially for vulnerable populations. So the Escazo Agreement went a long way since 1992 until 2018, where it was adopted. And let's get a little bit more deep in it. This is from 2007, one of the first meetings we had between government and civil society to start speaking about about access rights, which was the partnership of Principle 10. And finally, in 2018, after 9 periods of negotiations, after Rio Plus 20, we finally got the adoption of the Escazo Agreement on access rights. Basically, the agreement states that it's mandatory for governments to guarantee human rights to environmental and human rights defenders. This agreement is basically for the 33 countries of Latin America and the Caribbean, and it's mandatory, it's binding, and it doesn't accept reserves. And this is so all the 33 countries that are in the Latin American region can be accountable for those killings that we already saw that are happening. And well, this is a quote from Mary Robinson that says the Escazo Agreement places human rights at the heart of tackling the climate crisis. Some of the definitions that we can have in the treaty is environmental information, for example. Everything that's got to do with the environment and all the impacts, especially big companies or big projects are having on the impact, are having an environmental impact, should put all that information available. So it's very important to address that. Another definition that we can find in the Escazo Agreement is people or groups in vulnerable situation, which are these populations that cannot easily get a lawyer, for example. Many companies come and they invade their territories and they force them to do to have these projects, and they don't have a mechanism to react to that. And since the conditions that they have, many are in places very far away from urban centers. They don't have lawyers, they don't have support. Sometimes they don't have what we could basic stuff. So it's important to acknowledge these vulnerable groups that are not only in the jungle or in the mountains, they're also within our communities, which are the ones that get contaminated most or impacted most for some kind of environmental problem. So it's important to understand and to define these people or groups in vulnerable situation, because they are the ones that do not have access and the ones that do not have voice. So what this agreement wants is to give also voice to those people who are suffering the environmental impacts of these extractive industries that are going all around the world. And here we have a map of environmental conflicts going on around the world. And what kinds of environmental conflicts, and also the occurrence of assassinations. This is a more updated graph than the one I showed you before. And we still have mining, we still have biomass and land use, we still have conservation, water management, in industrial use, fossil energy, water management, nuclear infrastructure, and tourism. So this is the map right now of environmental conflicts. And all these environmental conflicts are basically have one aim, is that one part of the population can have a good quality of life or a standard of life that the rest of the planet cannot achieve. And that is one of the main problems that we are having as planet, how to address these inequalities. Why do some part of the population get all the benefits and other countries have to deal with all the problems that this exploitations of resources are having on their population? And here we have a graph that shows how related are climate change with, the Escazo Agreement, basically with the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. We have goal 13 here, and we have goal 16 here, which is the number 13 is climate change, is to take urgent action for climate change. And we also have the Paris Agreement. And here we have the goal 16, which is building societies of peace. If there is not equality, is really hard that we can achieve peace. And then we have all the other mechanisms related to human rights that UN has, for example. So we have to kind of like interlink all these pieces in order to build a better future that guarantees us in one side peace, and in the other, how are we going to face the climate crisis that is already happening in the planet? Around the Escazo Agreement, the Escazo Agreement will enter into force on April 22, 2021. So it's going to be in around 1 month. And we really hope that this agreement has the potential to shift that tendency of the killings of environmental and human rights defenders. And I want to acknowledge some very special human rights and environmental defenders that I had a chance to meet, and others that I didn't have a chance to meet, but I admire, like Berta Cáceres and Máxima Acuña. But Patricia Walinga has been carrying on a very strong struggle against the oil companies from the Sarayaku tribe. We have also Gloria Ushiga from the Zapara people, also fighting against oil. We have Maria Luisa Rafael, she's from here, from Bolivia, from the Andes. She's been fighting for water against mining. And we have Silvia Lipa, she is from the Leco people here in Bolivia, from the Amazon part. And she's also fighting against minery, gold minery basically, and other extractive industries. And iconically, we have Berta Cáceres, which is, she was an Honduran indigenous leader that was fighting against one of the mega dams that was going to cut the river, and she was killed for defending that river. So we also acknowledge her every time we talk about the Escazo Agreement, because the Escazo Agreement should prevent that kind of killings and damage. Well, these are some places where you can find more information, and that would be it. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much, Carmen. Really appreciate that presentation. And for people to know, we will be putting together a report back from this gathering with different links and information, because I know people want to learn more. Thank you, Carmen. That is really wonderful that we could learn about that. And just to close before we go to our next speaker, we are meeting Carmen and I now have formed a steering committee with different land defenders from the Latin American Caribbean region. We're meeting on a regular basis for advocacy work because, of course, one of the biggest things is implementation. What does this actually look like on the ground? What does this mean for land defenders? And how do they have access to these new agreements? And so we're very fortunate to be working with a group of lawyers who are helping us to outline country by country, what does this mean, especially for women land defenders, and how they can have access to these laws and to implement them. And then there's advocacy with the governments. But this is a campaign that will be going on for quite some time and is very key to protect the land defenders in Latin America. So thank you very much for your presentation. And now we're going to be hearing from Monique Verdon. She's from the Womxn Nation. She's a member of Another Gulf is Possible. She's the director of the Land Memory Bank and Sea Exchange. And we're very honored to have her be the WECAN Indigenous Food Sovereignty Program Coordinator in the Mississippi Delta. Monique, take us away. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much, Osprey. Honored to be here. Hello, everyone, and thank you, Carmen. That was a crash course that I'm looking forward to learning more about. I'm going to share my screen if I can.
Yep, just one second, Monique. I think you should have the ability now.
Yep, thanks so much, Catherine. I'm here at the end of the Mississippi River, where the freshwaters of the so-called United States, 41% of the continental part of the U.S. is draining down this waterway, and I'm at the very end near the Gulf of Mexico, and just wanted to acknowledge that this has been and continues to be a home of many different peoples, and want to acknowledge my ancestors and your ancestors who've made it possible to share in this time today, and grateful to be able to share a little bit of my story. And just want to also acknowledge this Mississippi River. We do a lot of land acknowledgements, and so I was really grateful that we started with a song to the waters, because I've been thinking very much about how if it wasn't for the Mississippi River, I wouldn't have land to sit upon and call home. And behind me is my home, just south of the colonial city of New Orleans, also known as Bulbuncha. But I want to point out this Atchafalaya River that cuts off of the Mississippi. They're really part of the same system, but the territory between the Atchafalaya and the Mississippi is losing land at one of the fastest rates in the world. Statistic is that, every hour a football field of land is lost from our shores. They're saying now every hour to 90 minutes, but it's been happening at a really fast rate for a really long time now. And Bulbuncha, as I mentioned, it's a Choctaw word. So this lower part of the Mississippi River was referred to Bulbuncha because it means place of many languages or place of many tongues. And though I am a daughter of the Womxn Nation, this has been a place and a site of trade for a very long time. The Homa, the Choctaw, the Shiramacha, the Atakapa Ishak, the Biloxi, the Shapatulis, the Bayugula, the Washa, Shawasha, the Tunica, and many names of nations that have been forgotten and erased. And so just want to acknowledge them and acknowledge that I'm on this home that has been home of many people, and also an entryway for so many who were brought against their will and enslaved, and part of this colonial legacy that we are now dealing with the side effects of. And want to give a shout out to my ancestors here in this photograph, Celestine and Ernestine. They're both standing on the front row of the photograph on either side. Celestine wears the white dress and Ernestine holds a baby at the opposite end of the line. And this photograph was taken in the late 1920s here in the Yaquishito, this territory between the Atchafalaya and Mississippi, which ended up being a refuge for many indigenous peoples as The Americans came in 1803, and just want to, point out that it wasn't that long ago that our people were still living very much so with the seasons, with the land, and I think that so much has changed in such a short amount of time. I often look at this last 100 years of time as a reference for me to understand and make sense of how we got here. And at this time, when this photograph was taken, was when oil and gas was first being found in South Louisiana. And since that time, we've had over 10,000 miles of canals. I say I live in the heart of Cancer Alley because we have, close to 200 petrochemical facilities that line our banks here in the Mississippi. As I mentioned, we're losing land really fast. That's because they've been pulling oil and gas and sulfur at this point we're mining dirt to build levees. It's death by 10,000 cuts. Saltwater is intruding into what should be brackish and freshwater systems. Sea level is rising, and we're sinking. We're literally sinking, which is part of the natural process that we've kick-started with man's manipulations and this legacy of extraction, which is tied to the plantation mentality. I live along the banks of the Bayou Terrebonne, and this is one of the southeasternmost points where buffalo would make their annual migrations. And so we talk about the water that connects us, the water that is the life for all living beings here. A lot of my work goes back to this disgusting place, which I'm laughing because I'm really crying. This is in a flood zone. This is in the heart of the Yakni-Shido. This is a place called Grand Bois, meaning big woods. And this is where oil and gas waste is dumped and treated. It's non-hazardous, but it has hazardous characteristics. So according to Louisiana law, which Louisiana is its own kind of banana republic on so many ways. And this is why I started taking photographs, because I was learning that my cousins were all getting sick because of these facilities, because of this facility and lead levels and kids, but being really high. But what I ended up finding out, and this is my grandmother, happy to honor her and so grateful for her to be my teacher, and showing me all the ugly and all of the beauty, and trying to remember that as much as I learn about how complicated and ugly it is that is around us, there is much beauty. And so she brought me down to this place where she grew up, Pointe-aux-Chien, or Pointe-aux-Chien, whether you call it Point of the Oaks or Point of the Dog, it's ground zero for land loss. And so a lot of my work has been focused on learning and understanding and recognizing the legacies of, colonization and taking the high ground. And then when oil and gas is found, taking the low ground. And so life in the red zone, they're saying in 2050 that all of this territory will be lost and will become open water. So I just, another elder of mine and teacher, Viviane Hotard, and these being, that the indigenous people have been inhabiting the Delta as long as the Delta has been here. It's baby land, it's new regarding geological land processes on the planet, but for thousands of years, folks have been inhabiting these lands, and now the ocean is taking it back. And there is resistance there, but oil and gas is quite strong. And, we're at a time where we're really facing, how do we move forward and how do we make it sustainable? And we've been told we have oil and gas so long that we believe it. And I just want to end here, which is this gross, disgusting BP oil spill, which happened in 2010. But to remember that, that there are hotspots of biodiversity, and these places are rich. And just as the crawfish build their chimneys, I set a timer for myself and now I'm going over. But just as the crawfish, we say our origin story is that the crawfish went to the bottom of the ocean and built the land, and we come from mound builders. This is a mound that's 1,500 years old. And we must remember that we're part of a longer legacy. And so I'm really honored to be working with a network of Indigenous women. And as we're facing these climate challenges, we're also recognizing that we can create a network, that we can reestablish old trade routes, that we can support each other with medicine and food, and that will be truly what gets us through. And that these relationships with the plants and with each other will be what we really need to heal. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Monique. And we're really excited to be working with Monique and a group of women, as she was saying, Indigenous women in the Mississippi Delta in 3 different states where there are different farms. And we just put up greenhouses this last year and the beginning of this year. And really, as she was saying, developing these trade routes where there's real rematriation of the land through this program. And actually, we're looking at getting some land through a land trust collectively, so that this is part of this process of land back and rematriation and supporting Indigenous peoples, and how we have real reparations from living on stolen land. So this is part of a large story of how we move out of fossil fuels into living in a good way with the land and supporting Indigenous people and food sovereignty. And especially as we head into the climate crisis, which is going to continue to accelerate, what does it mean to live on these lands? What does it mean to build these networks of survival and well-being? So thank you, Monique, for your incredible leadership. And just really excited about going forward. And now we are going to be hearing from Nima Namandu. She is the WECAN coordinator in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And she was who was actually right now in the field. So what she did is she sent us a short video that we're going to attempt to play unless the bandwidth isn't good enough, because we really wanted to include her voice. She's been a dear friend. We've worked together for 6 years now. There are 12 communities in the Atombe region of the Democratic Republic of Congo, where we're working with over 500 women. We're protecting old growth forests because it's very important for climate mitigation to have carbon sequestration in old growth forests. So we're protecting this huge area of old growth forests by reforesting damaged land that was clear cut. And that forest is to, yes, regenerate and regrow trees, but also a percentage of it is for human use to then protect the old growth. So it's amazing women. They sing incredibly, they dance incredibly, and they're planting a huge area in the DRC. So let's go ahead and try the video, and I hope it'll work.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, and this is morning from DRC Congo. I really wanted to wish you happy International Women's Day from WECAN Congo. We've been in partnership with WECAN California 7 years now. And the 7 years is not easy to be together. The marriage, 7 years, is a really good sign and is a good number. And today we wanted to wish you happy Women's Day, happy International Women's Day for all women around the world. Women who work especially on the forest, from Itombe forest to Amazon forest. For Peru and Canada and America, we wish you happy Women's Day. Now let me give you a little update about our work with WECAN Congo. We've been planting trees from a village to another village to another village. Every year we have 4 nurses to planting trees, and that women, they are working so hard. That is a really big benefit. We honor some land with planting trees because we want to protect our natural forest, Itombe forest, because we want to really to get back our new culture we was having in Itombe forest, honey. Right now we don't have no more honey in our forest, but right now we are bringing back to protect our old forest, our natural forest, to planting, not to cut again, no more trees to cut from our natural forest. This is why we are planting trees. 7 years now we are planting trees. Women planting trees have access to this, to get wood for cooking, to get light at night, to get everything, because we live naturally. It's why we need to planting more trees. And now, what I want to tell you is how we did from this crisis, COVID-19, really making us so down, making us feeling we are not human beings, kids dying with hunger. And they came, we have that crisis about COVID, we was in insecurity again. No peace for women. Women, they are protesting, asking peace. And we ask every talk we talk, we ask peace. And that's really, now we're fighting with hunger release. And we get from WECAN, California, we get food security. We got planting all these vegetables. We're planting 5 space of vegetables. That's making us security, food security, and kids have really enjoyed that, and women also, because they are on displacement camp. Around, one is in Mwenga territory, in Mikenge camp, where is the MONUSCO base, UN peacekeeper, and other members, and that all of those families, they get that security food. That's really making whole women happy. You know, when women, you find something to give to kids, this is, you celebrate. This is why we are celebrating this Women's Day, International Women's Day with WECAN Congo, because we get a little food for to give our kids, nourishes our forest, our natural, our planet. Really, I want all women, and I wish all women who work on planting trees, fighting with climate change. This is a big issues, and it doesn't have the border. It's really natural. It's like COVID. It's also like climate change. No border for those crises we are facing in these global issues. That is must everyone stand up, fighting with these global issues. And we are one in this globally. This planet is why we're supposed to stand up, every woman. And I wish all women really happy International Women's Day for Amazon forest, from there, from Equator forest, from South Africa forest, from Canada forest, from Saskatchewan community. We really wish all women around the world who work for to protect this planet. Only we have this one. This is why we suppose everyone put his contribution to impact our planet, to live in a good way. We need really to get, we are fighting also to get water, because if you planting trees, because they've got to get water on the forest. Beyond that, we can't have cleaning water. Is why we want to plant more millions of water on our Itombwe forest in our area, because we live naturally, and without trees and water, no life. I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Oh, it's so good to hear from Mima. I miss her so much. And again, she sends her love. We are working right now actually in the field on one of our reforestation projects. So there was no internet where she was. So this is a solution that we came up with today. Yeah, we are right now in the process of working in the nurseries. As I mentioned, there are 12 communities we're working in with women who are tending to the nurseries, and then we care for the trees. And then in the autumn and the winter time, during the rainy season, is when we plant. So that process is going on right now. And we've also added, due to the COVID-19 pandemic and food security issues, we've also actually started to grow food alongside the tree nurseries so that the women also become more independent and be able to have their own food. So there's a lot of work going on there. There's also issues, as Carmen was saying, happening in the Latin American Caribbean region of, threats to land defenders. A part of the women have created these really guard units where we're going out and ensuring that there's no illegal deforestation and illegal logging going on, so that the old growth is protected. So there's a lot of different components, and I just really salute the women there also, because it's one of the most dangerous places, again, in the world for women. It's a place of great violence. And so there's also a social justice component to this work of really uplifting women in the region. So thank you so much, Nima. And I will be sending her all of your good thoughts from today's call. And now we're going to be hearing from Dayara Chicano, who gave us that incredible, beautiful opening song. Again, she's from the Chicano indigenous peoples of the Brazilian Amazon, an independent communicator and coordinator of Radio Yande. And we're really honored, Dayara, to have you here to talk to us about the Amazon, what is happening in Brazil, and what's happening with indigenous people in the forest. Thank you, Dayara.
Thank you. Well, I don't have a screen to share because I'm using my phone, but I'll try to tell you a little bit about what's happening here in Brazil. So 2020 was a very hard year for us. The COVID pandemic made the indigenous movement to go online on virtual activities. We couldn't go to the streets, and we were sent to do this lockdown thing. But the truth is that the attacks are not under the lockdown. Our territories continue being attacked by the illegal gold mining, deforestation, and actually all the human rights violations are growing during all this last year. The first state that was affected by the pandemic of COVID was the state of the Amazonas. That is the biggest part of the Amazon rainforest. The indigenous communities were contaminated because of the invasion of illegal gold miners and that kind of persons. And we are also facing the worst government ever towards indigenous rights. It is a government that is self-declared anti-indigenous, that is working a lot to dismantle all the institutions, the governmental institution of states that are responsible for indigenous rights and the administration of indigenous territories. And we have the Minister of Environment that said that phrase that was something like opening the gates to the cattle. That means facilitating everything that is possible to agribusiness industry, to big land and cattle owners, and the mining industry as well. And it has been done. They are doing their work, the work they proposed themselves to do. They are doing it. And that means that the indigenous fight in Brazil, the indigenous struggle is being really growing. So the national movement had to make lots of different articulations. The first one was to create some kind of emergency funds to face the COVID pandemic, and WECAN is part of the supporters of the Amazon Emergency Fund. We thank you so much for this support. We have been working in many ways, nationally and international. These funds have been crucial because we are facing a really serious sanitary crisis in Brazil. As for example, like 4 months ago, the state of Amazonas was lacking of oxygen. Like there was no oxygen in any hospital in the Amazon rainforest. So you can imagine they are choosing people to live or to die. They have no personal, they have no medics, they have no material, they have no money for that. And so the most important way that indigenous communities have found to help recover from COVID is the traditional medicine, is the medicine of the forest. And this medicine is only guarded and protected by the knowledge of indigenous peoples, and this medicine only exists in the forest. I am not saying that we have the cure for COVID. I'm saying that indigenous peoples are civilization, that we have medicine, that we have science, and as any other science field, we are researching on how to treat this disease and how to survive this pandemic. And it has been a very important moment because we have many elders that have passed away because of this sanitary crisis, and at the same time, as always, we have seen the youngest generation are more conscious of the importance of traditional knowledge and the importance of the elders. And so there are many indigenous nations that are working on how to let this knowledge go pass through the newest generations, and that is really good. So it's important to talk about food sovereignty, the protection of the land, and at this point, women are really the ones that are that have taken the front lines. As for example, in my region, that is the Black River, we say Rio Negro in Portuguese. We have this campaign that is Rio Negro, nós cuidamos. It's like we take care of the Black River. We, the women, are taking care of the Black River. The women are the ones who administrate the communities. The women are the ones who know the medicines, that have the knowledge of the plants. And so it has been a really special moment to see the importance of the women organizing. I'm taking my notes here. And so we are dealing with so much. The Amazon rainforest reached the point of crisis where it is not recovering from all the attacks. Like we passed over 20% of the limit of deforestation that was possible to have the forest standing up. And the only places where this forest has been held is in indigenous territories. I am from the Tucano Indigenous Nation. We live in the border between Brazil, Colombia, and Venezuela. This is the most protected area in the Amazon rainforest today in Brazil. As Tucano, I cannot talk about the fires. I cannot talk that much about deforestation, but I follow many other indigenous leaders that are dealing with it directly, that are constantly under threat, under death threat because of that. Brazil is the country that kills the most environmental defenders in the world, and most of them are indigenous. And so the message is, I am really worried with the time, but the message is really, we need to defend this beautiful forest. Like for us, when we talk about the Amazon River, I was talking about the waters, the sacred waters of the grandmother. For us, the Amazon basin is like the tree of the sacred milk of the grandmother. It's a big tree of milk. And this Amazon is full of fruits. And it's like a serpent that is under the earth and in the sky as well. And we need the Amazon rainforest to have this living, pure, sacred water for humanity. All our forests are connected. We have a circle of forest. The forest in Africa, the forest in the North Poles, if we don't defend this forest, if we don't defend the indigenous territories, everybody is going to feel this. And at the same time that we say that this planet is a living being, is our living mother, we need to understand that our bodies are the same body of the planet, and that we need to detox. We need to detox from many things. We need to detox from the memories of colonization. We need to detox from the economical system that is making that much oppression and pollution in our system. We need to learn how to take care of our health and learn to live well and live happy and stop crying and just walk, you know, like planting the forest and working on having a good food for the next generations, and understanding that we are all a big family with plants and animals, that we are living beings and that we are sharing the same home. So thank you so much for the opportunity of sharing this little message with you. And we are fighting here, and we are always remembering all the other indigenous territories. We know that we are together. Thank you so much. Anyu.
Thank you so much, Dara, for your beautiful and strong words. And it's really an honor to have you here with us and know that we stand with you. And again, just to loop back to talking about the Escazo Agreement and why WECAN is so strongly advocating and working on that campaign, because it's precisely to protect the environment, but also the land defenders that Dara was talking about and that Carmen was talking about on the ground. We need so many things. We need these ground fights. We need to support the land defenders, but we also need policies at the top level so that we can have a foothold, leverage into being able to hold governments and extractive companies accountable for their activities on the ground. And so, you know, this is why I was sharing at the beginning of the call, the 4 petals of the flower that we're working with, so that we can approach things from, you know, immediate actions on the ground to stop harms, but then also these long-term strategies at a policy and a systemic level, so that we change how we're living and how we protect people who are protecting the land for all of us, to protect the Amazon rainforest for all of us. So thank you so much for your presentation. And now we're going to be moving from all the way from the Amazon rainforest up to Alaska and the Tongass rainforest, where we're going to be hearing from Rebecca Sawyers, who's Yupik, and Carrie Ames, who's Tlingit. They are WECAN Indigenous representatives in the Tongass forest, where we have an incredible hub of Indigenous women, where we've been fighting for since 2016 to protect the Tongass rainforest. So I hand the floor over to you, Rebecca and Carrie.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Sars Contreras, and I am living on Tlingit Ani land. And I just want to say that this battle was started by women in the Tongass. Our WECAN Tongass coordinator, Wanda Culp, has started trying to fight policies for trees and Indigenous rights in the 80s. Over the past 2 years, we started as a group of 4, and now our group has grown to 6. We have Carrie, Wanda Culp, as I mentioned earlier, myself, Adrian Lee, Yolanda Fulmer, and Mamie Williams. We have been attending online advocacy meetings and letting Southeast Alaska know who we are and what we're all about. We started out going to DC together to advocate for the roadless rule, a rule that protects old growth forests from corporate mass logging. And we went and visited the top board of the Forest Service, and we even got to meet Deb Holland. That was a pivotal moment in my life, and I'm so thankful for that. Since our trip to DC, we have been hitting the books and studying laws like Public Law 9338, Indian Self-Determination Act, and Education Assistance Act. And recently, our Tongass women have written a food sovereignty concept of tribal management with grassroots viewpoints. This management plan depends on other villages and regional tribal self-determination. And we are forcing reinterpretation of laws that will help our Native people get back onto the land. No more corporate mass logging, because trees in the Tongass sequester a lot of carbon. And we have sacred spots that have been bulldozed. And we are breaking new ground from our grassroots point of view. And that enables full participation of Indigenous use of land and waters, that we're using existing laws and creating amendments to accommodate for food sovereignty eco-management. We're also in the Tongass suing the Trump administration for trying to sneak attack on our forest. The roadless rule, as I mentioned earlier, that protects our old growth forest and forests, was misused, and the government thought they could slide through with a rider, and misuse of $1 million. So WECAN has been taking action, and with all of our knowledge combined, we're knowing our history and we're knowing what's happening in Congress, and we're not going to let it repeat itself. We are powerful, and we are able to create these labels, and we are just being who we've always been, and that's what it's all about. And I'm so inspired to be here, and I'm so thankful, and thank you for allowing me to speak, and we're all in this together.
Slinge kenach dia yuchatu sak yech na chatsati sluch na hari I chat hichchi hitach delayed ka yadi wishkitan dashkan ganachchi shat yadi. I'm sorry to get all choked up, and I'm sorry that you may not have understood what I just said. I'm trying to reclaim our language. It has been taken from us, and so much has. And so it's very important that I speak this language on our land, for we do not want to become shadows on our own land. I'm honored to be here with all the women here on this Women's Day. Thank you, Diara, for that wonderful song that was very uplifting, and it connected all of us, because water does connect us, and we are a good majority of water. So thank you for that. And thank you for WECAN for giving us this opportunity and this platform to be able to speak here. The Tongass is very important to us, not just, in spiritual ways, but also it supports us more than these governments have ever supported us, because you can listen to what they're saying, you can watch the lies come off of their tongues, but watch their actions, because they are lies. They have been lying to us. They make these rules and laws so complicated that we can't even, fight our own fight sometimes. So we have to include other people to help us, because they've made it so messy. And Alaska is very hard because we have corporations and we have Anilka. So we are not on reservations like the natives that are down in the lower 48 states. So it's much more complicated, and that's what's very confusing to the rest of the world. Alaska, we started with our grassroots with Elizabeth Paradovich, who I'd like to honor today. She was a woman of the Alaska Native Sisterhood, which was started with the Alaska Native Brotherhood, and they were our grassroots fights. And they didn't have much education, but they were great speakers. A lot of our people were great speakers. And so what they did is they started going out and speaking and getting our rights. And Elizabeth Paradovich got the first Anti-Discrimination Act, because in our own state capital of Juneau, they were saying no dogs and no natives allowed. And this was, 40s, 50s, not very long ago. And so it's very important that we get our feet back under us, because we have been disproportionately, undercut from our land and our resources, because in a way, these are our resources. This is our land, but we're not getting a cut from it. You know, if we were getting a cut from it, we'd be billionaires, because Alaska Natives, we are land owners. We own our land. And so that is a big difference as well. It's very confusing. But we also realize that it's not just about ourselves, it's about the world, because more people have come to live amongst us in Alaska. We have our state capital, and then an even bigger picture, as we have been studying more of this, that we have found that our old growth forest actually absorbs 8% of the world's carbon sequestration. And that's a big number. And so I want to ask these big corporations, you know, how long can you hold your breath while you're counting that money? Because air is more important, because we all need to breathe. And we also know that we are not above nature and we are not below nature. It is a circle of life. We are all one and we are all connected. And so the trees for us, it's like a dominoes effect. If the trees fall down, everything else is going to go with it. I don't need a grocery store. I need my forest, because right now, thank you to the Salvation Army Church. They have been donating a lot of food to our community, between milk and dried beans or chicken or whatever they can give. They have been doing very good and distributing that to our people. For right now, there's not very much milk. There's no shelf milk even. I have not been able to see heavy whipping cream around. And we already pay very big prices for that. It's about like $5, $6 for a gallon of milk. So you can see that our prices are gouging us, because everything has to be imported to us by plane or by a barge or the ferry system, because we are on an island. And even more so with COVID, we have realized that we do need this forest even more, because we cannot rely on the governments and we cannot rely on these stores so much, because we are starting to see that once we get cut off on one section and we've relied on that too much, that we don't have the food storages like we used to. We don't have the smokehouses. We don't have the families protecting the rivers. We are the stewards of this land since time immemorial, my elders have told us, before the beginning of times. And we had a great migration before the Tlingit, before the land picked us. You know, when we traveled here over 10,000 years ago, it is said that the land picked us and that the trees made an agreement with us and that they would help us. And so I'm also speaking out for the Osquani. We give everything a name, and because it has a spirit, whether it's a plant, a rock, the water, everything has a spirit to us, and we are all connected. And the Osquani have protected us so much. They give us fresh air. They have provided our homes, heat, our canoes for us to travel. We are the tide people. We travel by the tides because we have an archipelago of islands with us. So it's not like other coasts where the sea just rips right up onto you and rips it away. All these islands protect it and make nice little inner waters. And so it's not just the lungs of North America, our forest. It is also a salmon forest to us. For the salmon is very important. We are also people of the salmon, and that is a keystone species for everything else. And it doesn't matter how many fishing regulations or rules you're going to make on protecting the fish. It does not matter if they do not have a place to go home to have their eggs. It does not matter about any of these rules, because we need this forest for medicine. And people think of it's a joke when we say that things have a spirit and things mean stuff to us. This is spiritual. I do not go onto someone else's church and I do not make fun of it. I do not knock it down. This is our church. This forest is our church. It is our home. And in the past, when they had the smaller villages, you know, they would not take the trees that were right around the village. And that is because their grandparents told them that the trees protect us. The trees will clean the air and they will protect us, not only from these storms that are coming because they stand tall, you know, but they also protect our water and our land from staying there. Now that you've seen some of these huge clear cuts come through, we have lots of mudslides going on. You see our rivers are muddy because there is soil that is eroding into them. So then this means it is also going to affect our salmon. and it's dominoes. It all affects one another. And this roadless rule, I feel like the name is really confuses people. It should say logging roads we are going against, because these roads go out to nowhere. They don't go to connect anything a lot of times. They just go out to the logging unit site. And they built these roads. Some of these companies made more money off of building the roads than the actual timber that they received off there. And our taxpayers also in America, you know, they're losing money as well, because they were making these units appeasable for the buyers. And so over the last 20 years, there was $600 million that taxpayers have paid. So I don't know about you, but that money could have went towards stream restoration of all these other rivers that have been destroyed, where they logged right up to them instead of having a buffer zone. Now, on our beaches as well, they would log all the way down to the beach, all the way down to the water, and that's not good, because our deer come off the mountaintops and out, the snow pushes them down, and they're along the beach, and these big spruce trees, they protect them and from the winter weathers. And so it's important that we realize the knowledge, the intimate knowledge that the Indigenous people have of these areas, and the medicine. There was the digitalis medicine, which is a heart medicine that was discovered in Southeast Alaska. And as one of the other speakers said before, we don't say we have the cures for everything, but we do have medicines that will help. And our elders are the keys of knowledge to this. And it's very scary with COVID happening around, and it attacks our elders very harshly. And they're also trying to separate us by rural and not rural. Well, we are all the same. These cities were also once our village sites as well. Just because it's turned into a big city site does not mean that we cannot advocate for our food sovereignty. In what way is it right to mess with our food? You know, and that's the hard part, because you have the agriculture trying to manage the forestry part of it, but yet there is food involved with this. So how are they going to manage that both in unison with each other, because it's about the food, the salmon, and the medicine, some that we don't know of because our elders have not passed that knowledge along, but we hope that they can and will, you know. So we have intimate knowledge, but they need to give us a chance. And they pushed along a lot of this stuff. So I am the voice of over 90% of Alaskans and over 90% of people in the United States that want the roadless rule to stay intact. And so we need this rule to be codified into law, because we are tired of fighting like this. We are tired of being pushed down and set aside, like our values do not matter, even though they try and have these talks of, oh, we want to know about the Tongass and how you feel about it, but yet, you know, we are swept aside. They are not giving us a chance. They give money to the loggers, and they gave money to them to have their input in on the Tongass, but yet the native input was not put in there. And if it was, there was a very short deadline that you had to get to, and they pushed it. And we already don't have the funding in our corporations or our federally recognized entities in each village. We do not have the money, and we do not have the manpower, and they know this, and this is why they play on that. And they just try and confuse us and give us a runaround with all these rules, laws, and regulations. And this is why we have the proposals of each of the nations in Alaska to have their say, because I cannot tell you what up in Nome is dealing with, or up further, because Alaska is huge. It covers over 50% of the United States. So each region needs to be able to tell you about what they need and what is affecting them. In some places of Nome, the land is going away just like Mississippi. It's going every day, it's going. You know, there's the Pebble Mine and other areas. Up north, there's the Arctic. And for us, it is the trees. The trees are very important to us, and they are, you know, making it seem like they are not. And it is very important to us to be healthy as women, to raise healthier generations for these next generations, because we are survivors of genocide. They tried to wipe us out We will make them accountable for bombing Yangon. They bombed the town of Yangon, the US Navy. They also kicked us out of Glacier Bay National Park. In the 40s, it was a national monument and then upgraded to a national park, and they kicked us out of there. But they still allowed gold prospectors and fox farmers to go in there. But the indigenous people had to leave. You know, I don't feel like that is right. And we will make it right, for they destroyed a lot of our screens, which is, we did not have a written history. So our screens are our written history. They are our language because it is our art. And, you know, when they tried to destroy that, they tried to make it seem like nobody was there. And when they say the term wilderness, not touched by man, I'm sorry, but this land has been touched all over by my ancestors and has been taken care of by my ancestors. I do not have very much time, but I would like to also let you know that we would have families on each river that would protect the river. If it was a larger one, there'd be more families there, sometimes 4 to 5 different families. And every 3 years they put up a fish trap and they would trap the trout because they would space it so that way the little fish can still get through, but the big trout were caught. And that is because they are the egg eaters. And then you'd only let one family of sawbill ducks in there because they eat the fry. So we realized that everything needs to have balance. You cannot have too many of one thing or the other. And we did not get here by mismanaging our land. We got here by being smart. It is said that before the Great Flood, we had just about 1 million of our people, but then the Great Flood hit us and we had to survive from that. We have also had glaciers come down upon us as fast as a dog could run. And so we have deep history. We are deeply rooted to this land. And thank you all for listening to my words. And if we can learn about a place, we can grow to love it and we can protect it. And I hope that we can protect everything around the world with all these women's help and their fight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carrie, for your beautiful words, and Rebecca. And the fight goes on in the Tongass. As they both said, we are in the middle of a lawsuit with the, we sued the Trump administration, but that lawsuit carries on in the current administration to fight for the roadless rule and other struggles that we're having to protect Indigenous peoples in the Tongass, as well as the Tongass rainforest. And just thank you so much for sharing your beautiful words. And now I'd like to hand the floor over to Karina Gonzalez. She works at the Climate Justice Alliance, and we're really honored to have her also be the WECAN Women Speak Program Coordinator. And she's going to talk to us about Women Speak, which is a really exciting program we started several years ago, because as you can hear, the wealth of knowledge from women around the world concerning climate change and solutions is vast. And so I hand the floor to you, Karina, to share more with us about the Women Speak program. Thank you, Karina.
Thank you, Osprey. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Karina Gonzalez. As Osprey mentioned, I've had the great honor of working with WECAN as the Women Speak coordinator for about 2.5 years now. I am a Purépecha woman indigenous to what is known today as Michoacán, Mexico, currently residing on Ohlone territory. I'm here today to share with you about Women Speak, as Osprey mentioned. Women Speak is an online research and storytelling database designed to challenge dominant systems of exploitation and oppression of women and the earth through the collection and sharing of hundreds and ultimately thousands of stories about women leading struggles and solutions for climate justice. WECAN decided to build and launch this database after really many conversations with partners and after deep reflection on our years of collaborative movement building and work to uplift women's voices in all climate change discussions and solution building efforts. It was clear to us that the majority of the world's political and business leaders, journalists, academics, funders, and even fellow climate justice organizations and advocates still didn't necessarily understand the realities in which global women are disproportionately impacted by climate change, and yet still work with fierce resolve for a more just and equitable world. So Women Speak comes from this determination to bring women's voices to the forefront in their full diversity, in their full humanity, and in their full strength. We were also determined to move beyond statistics, which many others had been compiling and relying on for years, and instead move more into qualitative evidence and storytelling. The individual stories, those moments, those snapshots of women, their work, and their communities. So rather than just declaring that 80% of global climate refugees are women, or that 75% of household food production is done by women, we could instead provide hundreds of examples of how women have been affected and responded to climate disasters in different regions, or show hundreds of different examples of women-led farming projects to building food security, seed sovereignty, and health projects as well. So most of my family are farm workers in Mexico. And I was talking to one of my cousins, and she was feeling really disillusioned by the spread of monoculture and homogenization of seeds that they've now been seeing for years, as I'm sure many parts of the world are seeing as well. And I led her to the website, and she came across the story on Women Speak about Palestinian women who had started a seed library. A seed library aims to find and preserve seed varieties and traditional farming practices. She was so inspired by this idea that she then decided to start her own seed library. And I was talking to her about this the other day, and she said to me, at first, I thought this was just about revitalizing agriculture and promoting diversity in food. But it's just become so much more than that. This is about preserving cultural history and identity with pride and a reclamation of community power. So she's been working on this for a little over a year now, and the seed library continues to grow. So this is really the power of Women Speak, right? Yes, it's a storytelling database meant to demonstrate why women are central to climate justice, but also to provide inspiration and information and connections just on how women are contributing across the globe. This database holds vast knowledge and skill drawn through women's roles as healers, organizers, artists, culture shapers, and caretakers of the land. And as the COVID crisis continues, we can't meet in person. We need more spaces like this, platforms like this that allow for a cross-contamination of ideas virtually. So places like Women Speak become increasingly more important. I'm going to share the link to the website on the chat, and I hope that people will use and enjoy this tool and share its stories so that it can continue to grow in its depth and reach. Thank you.
Oh, that was wonderful. Thank you so much, Karina. And Karina has just been an amazing leader of this program, where she also oversees a host of interns from literally all over the world who contribute on a weekly basis, so that we are getting, thousands and thousands of stories in 15 different categories, everything from women in water to women in climate policy, to women in forests, to women in food security, to Indigenous rights, and women and feminist economics. So there's a variety of data there, and we hope that you will use this and it will be useful to you in your own work. So thank you, Karina, for your leadership. And last but not least, I am so honored to have Casey Camp-Hornick speak to us next. She is from the Ponca Nation. She is an environmental ambassador. She is the WECAN project leader and board member. She's also leader in the Rights of Nature movement and so much more. We are deeply honored to have Casey Camp-Hornick be here with us today, and I hand the floor to you, Casey.
Osprey. To each and every one of you have contributed to this day, this moment. I thank you, and I thank your ancestors and your future generations. Datia, Ijijijudi, Witike, Banka Abdi Manchte Banka, Oklahoma. Wahe Tamajite, Tinike Gankagiza Teati. WECAN. Osprey, and all of those other women. I wrote down Carmen, Monique, Nima, Diara, Carrie, Rebecca, Karina. And I'm sure that there are all of these other women that are part of our global circle right now, joining us on this new web of life that our computers bring us to, that are part of the reweaving of our ways. And when I say our ways, I want to say, first of all, Panka Abdi, I'm a Panka woman. I live in Oklahoma right now. My people are here from a forest removal. Prior to that time, this land was occupied by the Chalagi or the Cherokee for a short period of time. Longer than that, it was occupied and caretaking was by the Wichita people. Our people, the Panka, are originally from Nebraska and above that, that's now called Nebraska and South Dakota. After many migrations, and we came from a beautiful red star originally, and Great Mystery allowed us the honor of coming here to be part of this sacred cycle of life in this beautiful place that became our mother. And others called her Earth. We all have our name. Manjan is our name that she has taught us. We came here because the two-legged being made a sacred agreement with the Great Mystery to live in harmony, to live in a coexistence with all that is, not just other human beings. Our minds aren't good as humans sometimes because we have ego added. But yet our Mother, the Earth, she's good to us. Our Father, the Sky, is good to us. The teachers that we have that are now in the form of the sacred rock, they're good to us. The breath from the winds, it's good to us. The sacred water herself. I love her. I love her. And I'm so grateful to her to allow me to be part of this sacredness of her. And she loves me. The fire that comes from our Father's Son, it's part of me. This robe that I wear over my spirit called the body, it contains all those things. If you even think about when the body is empty of spirit, when the spirit goes to the next world, what leaves it? Warmth, yeah, the fire leaves. Water, that happens. Breath, yeah. What is left? Earth, that we all belong to. The one true mother that we all share. So when I listen to my young relatives, when I listen to those from the Southern Hemisphere and the Congo and the edges of the continents near the sacred Mother Ocean, I hear all of the same thing. We may say it differently. We may say things in a language that is common to all of us now that I'm speaking, that was forced on us when my mother was kidnapped into boarding schools, my father, when they were just babies. But yet somehow this commonality is what is giving us the power to communicate in this other way. You know, we always talk about the web of life and how it's been unraveled by mankind. And when I look at us, I see us as the ones that are reweaving the fabric, the ones who understand that this fabric of life is fragile and impenetrable, totally, absolutely so strong that it will not go away. The difference is now that we as Indigenous people as the wisdom keepers, because we've not moved so far from our original teachings that our cells don't teach us, even if we have been removed from our mamas and daddies, even if we've been removed from our original ways and colonized. Our cellular structure, genetic memory, teaches us to believe what is true, to hear and speak the truth, to listen to all of those ones that maybe in that other world only have value like a tree that breathes with us. And yet to others, that tree only has a value if someone cuts it down and puts it in pieces and sells it for that fake stuff that they can't eat, they can't breathe, and they can't drink. So our value system from the very beginning that we were taught into tomorrow, which is where we're going, is still the one that is going to be the one that works. And so we come at it from many, many different ways of understanding. Osprey, when she began this talk, talked about the inequalities, about racism, about the environmental genocide that's facing people like the Ponca and others here, about the inequality of wealth, about the climate. And I was thinking to myself, every single one of those is as woven together in mankind, humankind's relationship that has been severed. Every one of those results from that. And we can no longer ignore that. That's why when we were hearing from Monique about the people in her territory and all of the different ones that had inhabited that area, their cells are still there. They have now gone into the earth. They are now of the rock and the stone and the water and the wind. And when we eat the food that is grown in the earth, when we drink from her breast, that sacred milk that's called water, when we have wind blow us, that dust over us, and we breathe, we are part of those knowledges as well. That's what gathers us today. That's what gives us the impetus, the strength, and the wisdom to continue to know that these young people who talked about recreating the policies and amending the laws, they're not only using their incredible minds and spirits, but they're being fed that information, quite literally. It's coming through to them. And I see you over here in this part of my screen, so I'm looking at you that way, but I'll try to remember the cameras up here and look at you that way. I know you and I hear you. You are the voices of my daughters and granddaughters as well, as is Dayara. She's precious to us. Our family lives within her and her words and the sacredness of who she is. You know, we've been in the same space and understand one another from this red quadrant of Mother Earth right now, from the tip of the Arctic Circle to the tip of Chile, where the Red Nations, the great mystery, put us. We have reconnected in some kind of powerful way that I can't understand, but I feel and know. And when we share our knowledges, and when we bring back the power of who we are as Indigenous women, that are the matriarchs within our family, or as I call my granddaughter Casey, undergraduate of MIT, a matriarch in training, I see you all as that, either the matriarchs or the matriarchs in training, that are part of the understanding of what does our village need. Because of these magical things called computers, then my grandchildren kind of instructed me how to use them, then we are able to connect in a new way. But understand this, that was so deep to me, that these computers have these little chips in them that are silicone. That's a crystal. That's a stone. That's a natural portion of our Mother, the Earth, that is giving of itself so that we might have this moment. There is nothing that you and I participate in that doesn't come from the Mother Earth. Nothing. And so the first thing that I feel like we need to do is say that out loud to ourselves, to show appreciation and thanks and gratitude for what are the true powers. How do we dismantle this colonized mind thought that says money is power? It is not. Again, you can't eat, drink, or breathe that. What good is it to you except to buy those exact same things that have been commodified by the men who want to retain power? And maybe some women who are colonized in that mainstream way of understanding too. So part of that is to remove that from our mind and to understand that those human beings who are part of the corporations who have personhood, the corporations do, which is the silliest thing ever that we even buy into that those head of those corporations, those are no different than you. All power in humankind is assumed power. Those are people who said, I'm going to run for an office. I'm going to buy my way into a situation. And we all agreed with them. Yep, we're going to give you that. So today we're going to really understand what is real power. There are only a few things that are the real power that are going to help those of us find a way forward. What do we need that is power? Our Father, Son, or in whatever way you want to consider that beautiful being that comes up and gives us the day and the warmth, helps things to grow, creates the weather. I'd say that's power. Without that, we would not exist. Nothing would. I'd say that the sacred water herself is a power. She has her own ways. Sometimes she is ice. Sometimes she's a snowflake. Sometimes she rises in a mist. Sometimes she flows. Sometimes she has a rush against the shore, and she's power that way. Sometimes she's steam, because the fire is also power. Those are powers. The wind that blows, the thunder nation that contains fire, air, water on the wings of an eagle. That's power. So when we want to really accept and understand what is necessary for human life to continue on Earth during this time of crisis, they call climate crisis, then we have to reassess in our own minds that the sacred corn that grows is a medicine that gives us food, that the buffalo that lived here, or the relatives down south, the winged ones, the stone, the grasses, the trees, the mountains, those are necessary. Humans aren't. We kind of mess things up. So those of us who recognize those things then have to reassess, how do we fix them? How do we enlighten others that the air is not for sale and so we can't do carbon trading? That the air is not for sale, so net zero in carbon actually means that they're going to buy and sell the air around us. And if you buy and sell the air in your Phillips 66 in Ponca territory, that means you're going to kill more of my children, that more of my elders are going to die if you continue to do that. How and when did the water give you permission to kidnap her and put her in a plastic bottle? What's wrong? She has a life of her own. The air has a life of its own. Who says that you can genetically modify a seed? Who gave you that permission? Our way of understanding is we ask permission for these things. And if they don't answer you in prayer, if you can't feel what that answer is, then it's probably no. You need to leave it alone. Allow all things to exist in the manner in which the great mystery put them in place if you want to have a place for your generations to come. Just now I touched this little woman here. My oldest granddaughter gifted me with her. And it was at a time when we were praying for the MMIW, the missing and murdered Indigenous women, the missing and murdered Indigenous people. So a long time ago, 500 years ago or more, 800 years ago, the Pope, again, just another man that everybody decided to believe in, wrote down some words, so everybody decided to believe those. And they were a papal bull edict that said, if you go onto another's territory and they're not Christianized, well, gosh, you get everything they got and them. You can enslave them, you can kill them, you can take everything. So you have to kind of imagine it from our viewpoint. I got a door here in my home, and it's like somebody might come and I'd say, come on in, come on in. You want some food? I have some water. How can I help you? I can see you're needy. That's the way our people felt. And they said, well, you just get on out of here, because now I live here. That food in there, well, I'm going to eat that. This home, I'm going to live here, And on and on and on. That's how this all started, with some human being deciding that they could do that, and they did, So how do we reclaim these? How do we look at those laws? How do we align the natural laws with human law? And one of the ways for the Panka is to exert our sovereignty by saying that we're not protecting nature. We are nature protecting. We are nature protecting itself. We're not separate from. And so by recognizing the rights of nature within a statute, a law, we are actually protecting ourselves. And that's another long story that we can go into sometime. We'll also be protecting the water herself. That's going to be the next step. We've put a ban on fracking and injection wells. We've done all of the things that we can to protect ourselves, and understand again very clearly, we can do a just transition away from fossil fuels. We can make the decisions in our life that affect the generations to come. We can recognize solar panels work instead of fossil fuels, and that's natural and will go on forever. There are ways forward. That am I just another human being, a matriarch, a person that remembers, that is part of generations and generations and generations that knew how to live in balance. Gosh, I'm really glad to be here with all of you. And the only thing I'm going to say to you now is warrior up. Warrior up. Sure.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much, Casey, for your extraordinary comments and words and knowledge and wisdom and beauty that you share with us. You're getting all kinds of love in the chat section, and just, yeah, thank you. Thank you for bringing us so much power and wisdom. So just taking a minute to take in those words and appreciate the wisdom. So one of the things I want to say, just sort of weaving together this conversation, is that we really need deeply to move away from this extractive economy that is based on the exploitation of Indigenous peoples, Brown and Black communities, women, and the land. It's a really tragic cycle of colonization and capitalism and racism that's based on sacrificed peoples and sacrifice zones. And that can never work. We can't have some people be the people who have all of the wealth and a certain lifestyle at the cost of sisters and brothers and our plant and animal relatives around the world. That system is over. And we're seeing how it is collapsing the reality that people have been holding for a really long time. So a pledge today coming from WECAN and from all of us is that this extractive economy and these sacrifice zones that demand sacrifice people is over. We can't have fossil fuel extractions and deforestation happen someplace else on some other people's lands, somewhere away where we don't see it. Today we see it. Today we hear it from these women. And I also don't want to forget today that we hear and remember that right now we have sisters right now on the front lines of Line 3 here in the United States, battling Enbridge's Line 3 with hundreds of arrests. I could name fights all over the world that are happening right now with women putting their bodies on the line, and to really think, as Casey is saying, to warrior up, what are we willing to give? What are we willing to risk? Some of us have been arrested. Some of us will continue to be. Some of us have been on the front lines, but there's all kinds of ways to be involved. And I'm going to share some with you in a moment. But, we've been putting a lot of links into the chat to these different fights. And, it's that balance of being warriors and healers, warrioresses and healers. We need to fight and heal, and we need to do it all at the same time. And I'm really encouraged by global Indigenous-led resistance movements, the global movement for Black Lives, the global movement for Me Too, that illustrate how people have been and are ready and willing to fight for justice, as well as to heal and imagine a different path forward. And there are so many ways we can go forward for regenerative, renewable energy future, for land back, for food security, for community-led solutions, for a just transition. And I know we will not stop until there is accountability, justice, and liberation for all of us. And we're in this. We're not going anywhere. We are ceaseless. We are on this. We are together with all of you. And we thank you for all of your work as we build a collective power that is unstoppable. And the one thing I'm going to ask from all of you before we close today is to let you know that in the context of the United Nations climate talks in Glasgow later this year, whether they happen online or in person, in the lead up to that, WECAN is organizing the Women's Assembly for Climate Justice, Solutions from the Front Lines in Protection and Defense of Human Rights and Nature. And it's going to be a public forum that will take place virtually in September in parallel to the UN General Assembly. And during the Women's Assembly, grassroots, Indigenous, Black, and Brown, and frontline women leaders, and global advocates and prominent policymakers are going to be coming together in solidarity to speak out against environmental and social injustice and draw attention to the root causes of multiple interlocking crises and present diverse arrays of visions, projects, policy frameworks, and strategies to uplift solutions. And the Assembly will be calling on governments, calling on financial institutions, calling for urgent action within a climate justice framework. And we're going to be producing an online collection of actions, policy frameworks, and solutions presented at the Assembly that speakers are going to be bringing there over the course of several days. And so we're going to have these tangible results highlighted in an online portal to draw upon at this vital time as governments and companies and civil societies prepare to engage in COP25, the UN climate talks and beyond. And so right now in the chat section, I'm going to have Catherine put there a link to how you can get involved in helping us to amplify this effort, helping us to organize this effort, helping to be engaged so that we have women from all over the world participating in this online forum that is in the buildup to a really important UN climate talk where, again, governments are going to be meeting around the climate crisis. But for us, it's so much more than that. Is it about system change? It's about rights of nature, Indigenous rights, about Black liberation. It's about changing the systems that we're in. So we're going to be using this platform in September over the course of several days to show these different policy frameworks and different solutions and build power together. And today is part of that announcement to build up to that event, because let's face it, we're running out of time. Mother Earth has made it perfectly clear through the COVID pandemic, through the climate crisis, through environmental degradation, through the hardships so many people are experiencing, that we need to change the path we're on. We're in a portal. We are in the time of change, and we are the change makers. So we invite you to participate with us and build power with us, build towards that assembly. We thank you so much for taking this time with us. Know that we love you, that we care for you, that we're standing with you. And I want to give a special shout out to all of our speakers today, our WECAN network, for incredibly powerful words and song and sharing from your heart, your knowledge, you know, to know that we do have a request this week. We are in the middle of several very high stake meetings with financial institutions, and we really ask special thought for that. We have incredible openings happening over the next few weeks with very high level financial institutions to talk to them about this path change, about protecting the rights of people on the ground. And so just a special shout out to Have Good Thoughts for us this week and all the frontline women who will be speaking at those engagements. Again, we send you our love, and we're going to go ahead and open it up so that we can just hear each other's voices and wish each other a happy International Women's Day. Catherine, if you could go ahead and put us all in unmute, and we can share greetings from all over the world. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you.
Oui, Blaha.
All to all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Happy